So I had to go back to Woods Logging for 2 years to get enough income to do that. So those 2 years from 2010 through 12 were some of the more despairing years I've had. I was literally broken.
Well, this is going to be fun. I have been wanting to do this for a while, Frank. Just sit down with you and talk about the journey that you've been on for some time now.
Yeah.
We have shared that journey, and I've been privileged to walk with you and some not really intimately, but just I've been in your life, around your life all the time. I mean, this journey started for you as far as what my involvement was back at Woods Logging.
Yeah.
You were there working as an employee at Woods Logging.
Yeah, for 25 years.
A long time.
Yeah.
And then a journey started from there. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how that started, but it's kind of a fascinating journey how you got to be the director of, I don't even know what it's called now. Is it just still Community House on Broadway?
Well, there's two separate organizations.
We'll get into that.
But it's Community House on Broadway.
Talk about the journey, how you got there.
Well, I guess I would go back to the early 90s when my wife and we were in a Bible study group or a friendship group with Scott and Diane Spencer up in Castle Rock. And they had a little boy and they wanted him to go to someone. And so they said, hey, could you guys become foster parents? And we said, yeah, we can look at doing that. And so we did it. And next thing you know, we're taking in not just one, but two kids into our home at the same year Mariah was born, which was 1994. So we brought in 3 kids into our home. Now, these are kids that years later you'll connect the dots. It's pretty amazing how it all connects. But so we brought them in. And then throughout all those years of being in North Lake, we would stop by at Evangel. We'd participate in some activities. I remember Mike Fox coming into Woods Logging Supply and telling me about some of the things you guys are doing. Yeah. And so we went to a couple of prophetic things that you guys were doing at the time. And that was kind of a new thing to me. I didn't grow up in the church. I became a Christian at 15, but it was, I didn't have my own car, so I didn't go to church very much, but I read the Bible and then got married in 1986, like shortly after college. Yeah. And so it's my own journey with my own family. And
so you started at Woods Logging.
Yeah.
Then you became an associate pastor at North Lake Baptist, which is a bit of a jump.
It is. It's a bit of a jump for coming from Woods Logging Supply. You guys got dragging and chokers, cussing and spitting and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But, Woods Logging Supply helped develop my business skills. Yeah. I never really thought of that, but I was due to lead Woods Logging when one of the owners retires, which was Mickey White.
I remember that.
And
because that was one of the big decisions.
It
do
really
I
was.
Hang in here?
Yeah.
Or do I go to North Lake?
Because they were priming me to take over. Yeah. And so he didn't have a son that was going to take over the company, so I was going to do that. So there was a struggle in my mind. But when 2004 hit and Kerry Kirkwood and Nolan Griffin came up from Texas, I believe, and they did a prophetic, time where they spoke over my wife and I. Right. And it was incredibly...
So let me interrupt for a sec. When you're talking about the prophetic, you're talking about people who listen to what God has to say about other people. And so they're listening to see, what is it, Lord, that you had to say to this person? They sat down with you and said, this is what we feel like God wants you to know right now, Frank.
Yeah. Yeah. And when they started speaking, about me, they said, you're not just going to hold the door open, you're going to bust through the door. And we really didn't know what that meant at the time. But one of the things and to Pastor Mark and those guys and the elders was, I don't have an associate pastor, and I need a pastor or associate pastor. And Frank has no formal training at all.
So let's pick him.
Yeah, let's pick him. And they were very like, oh no, Frank, really? But when Olin kept on going, it was like a half hour reading, if not 45 minutes, where they were speaking what God put on their heart about Barb and I. And I think everyone was stymied. We were just shocked. And I've got the transcript even today. Yeah. And so when you look at that piece, and then you look at how Mark took 1.5 years patiently waiting for the Lord to speak to him to bring me on the staff in 2005. And so I had been at Woods Logging that whole time from 86 to 2005, but we'd been involved in leadership. So I ended up pastoring with Mark and hanging out with you guys a lot.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you probably were learning a lot.
Oh, I was learning a ton. Well, no, I really was.
About
Jeff.
how to walk with people.
To hear God, to walk with people, to be a shepherd.
Yeah.
Because I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5", 270. And I kind of can come across because I'm full speed ahead. Yeah. And it could be kind of, intimidating sometimes. And
well, I just know that because that was my journey too, Frank. I was a respiratory therapist. Then all of a sudden one day I was a pastor. Yeah. And it's like I had no idea what this meant except for when I watched my pastor do what he did. Yep. I was like, I want to do that. Yeah. And I thought I was going to do that. I thought I was going to continue on. I thought, oh wow, this is great. Mark and I are going to be a team. Yeah. And but I hung out with you and Larry and Chris Davis and Mark and Scott, and we'd go away on retreats, and I just picked up a lot of what you guys were doing. Yeah. And just imitating. More of the heart, too. And Mark's, the grace. In business, you're kind of, it's kind of like you're looking the edge to win the bids or win the contracts to keep the business growing and going. Yeah. And it's a little bit different in ministry. Yeah. You be gentle. Yeah, because you're growing. You're trying to shepherd people to grow spiritually close to God. And so, but all that was preparing you for what you're going to do next. It was. Well, that in, so we went through the 5 years of pastoring, and our oldest daughter had to go to Azusa Pacific. Well, she wanted to. Yeah. To get an MSW, Masters of Social Work, at a Christian university. So I had to go back to Woods Logging for 2 years to get enough income to do that. So those 2 years from 2010 through 12 were some of the more despairing years I've had. It was I was literally broken. Now, what do you? Because I'm not sure what you're talking about. Well, why that got you there? Well, I felt like I was going to be pastoring with Mark, and we were joining together. I had to. I had to. I was literally doing 2 jobs for a while there. Yeah. At North Lake, I was full-time, and then I do government sales for Woods because we had 5 kids, at the time. Yeah. And that's a lot, but, and then being on a pastor's salary, that's not a lot. That's not a lot. And so 2010 came along, and I had to shift, and it was ripping my heart out. Oh. And I went back to Woods to lead, to manage. And it was a very difficult 2 years, extremely difficult. But in the midst of that, we ended up, remember during times of 2007, 8, 9, and 10, I led Servant Week. And so that was giving me kind of a foundation with more of working with the city pastors. Networking and getting, projects and all that stuff together. Well, in 2010, I called CPS and I said, hey, I want to do something for the foster kids, for Servant Week. We want to do something. And they said, this Rachel Curtin, I think her name was, she said, well, Frank, the foster kids, they're getting a lot of stuff right now, but we have 3 little kids that are actually siblings to the 2 you have in your home. And we want to keep them together. Would you and Barbie consider taking them in? And keeping in mind, we'd been in a lot of traumatic situations from the year 2000 on was a lot of psych unit stuff. Yeah. And so, which is really odd, because I'm
I'm literally in 2005, I was at Seattle Children's Hospital before I came on with Mark. I was at Seattle Children's Hospital for 3 weeks. I'm staying at the Ronald McDonald House and going over to the psych unit at Children's Hospital to learn how to handle some of the stuff with bipolar and, Annie's difficulties.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I learned a lot. So a lot of what I learned, it's years later, it's going to be applying to an organization I start.
And you know this. Yeah. We all know this. Mm-hmm. But some of the most difficult times we go through are the most intense training times for what's about to happen.
Oh, I felt like this big when I was pastoring. I was with, Mark. He's upper echelon. He's a very humble guy, gentle, but very, he's a great leader. Yeah. He's an apostolic leader, I would say. Yeah. And we connected really well, but, he had to rein me in. And that was oftentimes very frustrating for him, I think. Yeah. But he wanted to have someone he reined in than having to prompt them.
Yeah. So when did the opportunity open up for Community House on Broadway?
Well,
how did that come to you?
That was on literally, it's bizarre because Bob Guide was leading the search committee for a new leader for Community House. And so in late 2011, I got a call and Mark, he said, "Hey, Frank, these guys are going to be calling you. They want to talk with you about leading Community House and etc." And so I said, "Okay, well, I'll go interview." I really didn't know what this was leading to. Yeah, I had no idea, but I put my hat in the ring, so to speak. And keeping in mind, we just took on those 3 kids that I talked about. Yeah. So we have 8 now, and so Hannah is finishing in 2012 from Azusa Pacific. So literally on the way home from California, I get a call from Hannah's graduation in May of 2012, I believe it was. Driving back from California, she graduated. And so I was able to fulfill my responsibilities to help her. Yeah. They said, "You got the job, Frank," on my way back. Wow. And Woods Logan had no idea, and it shocked them. Yeah. And but there it was, my journey to Community House. I was shaped in business, and then when I came on as a pastor, I ended up doing some, pretty broad ministry stuff. Yeah. And Servant Week and all the stuff that you guys do, and then personally, you knew what it was like to be in the center of fostering. Oh yeah, because mental health was a big part of it. And those kids had lived at Community House just prior with their grandma and with their mom. So we're taking in kids that had lived at Community House, unbeknownst to us at the time. And
Isn't it interesting that no one knows this stuff?
No one knows.
They're thinking, how did Frank get this job? Yeah. And yet God behind the scenes was preparing you for every step along the way.
Oh, it's just, so in 2012, I get the job, right? And we had taken on the 2 kids, and we actually introduced ourselves to the mom, Lakeisha, and because it was not an open adoption initially. And so we thought, hey, we're gonna allow her to see the kids and etc. Well, there was a time where she was in jail, and I was a pastor in that 2005 through 10. I was a pastor, and I came in as a chaplain. Yeah. And I'm speaking with her, and she doesn't know who I am. Yeah. And I'm talking to her, and I told her about, she said she lost a couple of kids, and this was prior to losing the other 3. And I said, "Oh man, that's hard. But that was good. You gave them up to help them." And she said, "Yeah, I heard they went to a really good place." And I couldn't say nothing. Yeah. Couldn't say nothing, but that was in jail. So here is, after a year at Community House in 2012, the year before, they couldn't pay their bills. Windows are falling out. It's kind of fallen apart. Yeah. And I didn't know all the couldn't pay the bills the year before stuff. Yeah. But long story short, in 2013, October, I was doing the memorial service for Lakeisha, the mom that gave birth to the kids. And at her funeral, I had already been talking to Phyllis Cavens from Child and Adolescent and some of the other behavioral health people and saying, I got to start a behavioral health organization or mental health because Community House is off the hooks. We need people to be able to be on site to help these people.
You landed at Community House
in 2012.
Kind of surveyed what was going on.
Yeah.
For how long had it been going since before that?
1988 it started.
Since 1988, it had basically looked the same.
Yeah. I think Rich Kirk came in and took it over. You know, he was like the second or third leader. They had some short stints.
But he really stabilized things.
He did.
But it looked one way. And then all of a sudden you start getting this sense that there needs to be a mental health component and things were about to change.
Yeah, things were about to change and I didn't know it. You know, I had no idea. But Barb and I had been through years of the system for the kids in mental health.
Yeah.
And so here I am at Community House. We couldn't get the help again for the people at the shelter. And so I'm going, oh my goodness. So I do the memorial service October 2013. And I'd been doing the groundwork in my mind and in the community to find out what can we do to solve this problem. At the funeral, there's a gal in the back of the church, and she stood out because she was one of those professionals that I said, hey, who are you? Oh, I'm Stacy Crutcher McFadden. I was her counselor for the last couple years of her life. And she did really good. And I said, oh, Stacy, if you'd like to say something during the service, because I was officiating it.
Yeah.
So she did, but afterwards I said, Stacy, I'd like to start a mental health organization. Would you be interested? And she said, well, I kind of got my own thing going, but I'll keep it in mind. Here's my number. 2 months later, Mark Thorson and the 5 doctors and their spouses gave the internal medicine clinic December 2013.
Yeah.
And so they gave us a building.
That's where I used to work as a respiratory therapist.
Seriously.
Same building.
No way. We breathed new life into it because it was, we came into it, it was ADA approved.
Yeah.
So we've got our building now that we could do that with. So I called Stacy right away in December, said, we got a building given to us. I'm going to start this. I need your help. Would you? And I said, keep your business going. Your domestic violence counseling and your anger management. And you can use our facility even, but help me get it started. So we took 9 months, got it going. And then we got a contract January 2015. That first year, we only served 250 people, which disgusted me because we had 700 people come through Community House.
Yeah.
And that's how much, usually 600 to 700 come through Community House, and about 150 are kids. And it really did. The demographics changed drastically in 2014, I should say.
Yeah.
Because I stopped feeding the non-residents, and we all of a sudden got flooded with single moms.
Yeah.
And 80% were single moms. And so we saw what was happening. These gals with kids get a guy that grabs onto them, they get addicted, and that way they can access their funds, live with them, and their lives fall apart, the mom and the kids. So we had that happen, and I literally, by October 2014, we had 62 adults and 63 kids for a solid month in 2014. So you can see why I'd be disgusted in the whole year of 2015, but that's part of growing an organization. Yeah. That's
always grows slower than you think.
Yes, that's right. So today, we do 2,100 clients a month at Core Health.
That is amazing.
And we do chemical dependency, mental health, supportive housing, supportive employment, and all of that's funded by Medicaid. That's all we're interested in, is helping the kids, like Barb and I really needed,
right,
and our kids, and those that are homeless, like the people at Community House. Yeah. And so I've been able to branch out to the different gaps in the system, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a support in the homeless sector before like this ever.
See, that's what I think. I think it's amazing, and I don't think people realize this, Frank. But I think sometimes people look at what you're doing and they think he's just trying to build this thing. And the reality is, what you're doing is you're paying attention. You're aware of what's going on around you all the time. And when you see something that's not being done, it's like, we got to do something about this.
Right.
And I don't think people realize that. I think they look at the whole thing and they think it's a building project kind of, but it's actually a people caring for people project
it really
at a
is.
really high level, isn't it?
It really is. It really has, and it's been with a lot of sacrifice. You know, our family's been through a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and recently we went through the loss of our daughter Mariah, which is extremely difficult, especially in the field where I work in addiction.
Yeah.
And she was a wonderful, lovely girl.
Yeah, yeah.
And well, I don't want to get too deep into that.
Yeah.
But
so what came next?
Okay, so 2015, and then I started to see there was some things that we could do that can get our SUD program going, the addiction. Because addiction took a couple of years extra.
Yeah.
I didn't really get that going until 2017.
So first came mental health, then addiction.
Yes, because addiction, actually the first guy I hired actually relapsed and died.
Wow.
Jim Lefevre.
Yeah.
It was just a heartbreak. And so it took a while. But now we got like 14 or 15 SUD counselors, probably some of the most in the community. Because it's such a huge issue.
Yeah.
60% of the adults that come to community house are suffering from some sort of substance abuse.
Yeah.
And so they got to be, when people come to community house and live for free, then they are obligated to be a part of the program. They're voluntarily coming to you to be a part of your program.
Yeah.
And since they're doing that, they've obligated themselves to be a part of it. And so we really do have a mandate to do assessments and find out who you are and what help do you need to recover. What are you recovering from? And if it's mental health, okay, great, we'll help you. If it's SUD, substance use disorder, we'll help you. But if it's just housing or employment, we'll help you there too.
Yeah.
And so
But it's not really meant to be a rest stop in people's lives.
No.
It's meant to be a place where they can begin to get healed.
To rebuild, and they're broken when they come to us. And we have some gorgeous redemptive stories. I mean, beautiful.
Yeah.
And probably in not the dozens, but well over 100 and some. Because every year you look, we have about, I could say solidly 70% of the families come out stably housed. We don't have them back in again. You know, there's like a 4% to 6% recidivism rate.
Yeah.
Individuals and adult and families. So, yeah.
I think one of the things that
yeah.
we're going to have to do,
yeah.
Otherwise we're going to be here all day.
What time is it?
The stories the stories are huge.
Yeah.
So you built Core Health, then you develop an inpatient treatment facility over by the hospital.
Well, it's actually, okay, so what that is I noticed that there's medically fragile people on the street.
Right.
And I was going upstairs one day at Community House, and I walked by one of the rooms. There was this elderly lady. She hadn't been downstairs for 2 months.
Story after story
2
after
months.
story. Yeah.
And I thought, I've got to do something for those that can't get up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
So Core Health actually beat out someone else by $10,000. I had a chance to rebid, and I said $625, and it was $10,000 above the other one, and so we got it. And there was 27 rooms, the old Park Royal. Yeah. So now we could put those that can't go up and down the stairs, or those that are really psychosis.
Yeah.
You know, that shouldn't be around overstimulating environments with kids.
So next, there's the Cortons building.
The Cortons building. That was
what inspired that?
Well, we had a story again. We had a kid run out on the street, get hit by a car on 11th Avenue, threw him 6 feet in the air, and he ran off. It was one of our kids, and he was okay. it was bruised up, but it, no duh, we're on a corner, a busy corner at times, and we got 50 kids in the building wanting to release, wanting to run, wanting to play. And so I needed a place for those kids to be.
Yeah.
And so for years, we'd go down to the Broadway campus in the summertime or whatever, but we really needed a place. So I created an idea where we have a behavioral health facility where it's an activity center. It's a youth center. And I've got art rooms. I've got a theater where we could watch movies, a climbing wall, a gym. I mean, it's a 27,000 square foot building built out. And then we've got an arcade. And kids from the community between 2 and 5:30 could come and participate at the arcade.
See, I think that's another thing people don't realize.
Yeah.
That's not just for patients,
No.
or not just for residents.
Yeah. No,
but that's something that you've done for the community.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Because we see how we go to 30 different schools now.
Yeah.
And so with that brings a lot of kids that don't have a place to go. That's what we're finding is there are a lot of youth that really don't have a solid place to stay.
Right.
Unaccompanied youth, or even youth where we got a situation where a dad was taking the kids' money who was working, and the kids in high school trying to make it. And so now we got a couple of teenagers living with us at the shelter, and I shouldn't really be doing that. 18 and 16.
So now you've converted the Courtney's building to a youth center.
Youth center. So
now
we start seeing this need for helping the homeless kids that are out in the community, in the schools, not at community house. And so I'm thinking we got to really do something for a youth shelter. And so I applied for a grant with the state.
Yeah.
And we were awarded a $5.3 million grant to build a youth shelter. And so it was right across the alley from Community House. And I'd been looking at that building for years, thinking, oh, that'd be a perfect building. Because a lot of times you have 24/7, 365 staff.
Yeah.
And to borrow staff and have some versatility is very important.
Yeah. Share resources.
Yeah. And so here's the overall build out of the youth shelter would be $7.8 million. And that would be a commitment for 40 years. Because when you get money from the state, you've got to use it for that amount of years, or you got to pay the money back.
Yeah. So
for 40 years, it's going to be used for low-income housing for youth. And so it's from 13 to 17-year-olds can stay there. So that's
going to be an extension of community house.
It is a community house, yeah.
Yeah, residential housing. Yeah, it's for young people.
Yep, from 13 to 17 years old.
And how many people are you planning on being able to house there?
Well, we have 24 separate rooms, a dozen guys, a dozen girls, and then we put bunk beds in each.
Yeah.
And if we get siblings or people that could get along, we could put 2 per room, which would get up to 48.
Yeah.
I don't suspect we'll get up to 48 for a couple of years because we want to start out slow because there's some obstacles we've got to overcome.
Yeah.
Like some of the Washington administrative codes.
Yeah.
We're working on that.
And you're used to navigating those kind of
I've had
waters.
to get used to it.
Yeah.
And lawyer stuff and all kinds of stuff that I never touched before.
So we haven't even talked about what's going on up north that you have. So one of the things I've noticed about the way you work, the way that you develop direction is that you're really aware of what's going on. You remember names, you remember dates, you remember places, you remember the journey. And it seems to really inform you about what you're going to do next.
Certainly.
Well, for one thing, you've seen God come through time after time after time in ways that are
just like
miraculous.
Yes.
And it just seems like whatever's going to, well, I should say too, and the whole time, your physical health has really struggled.
Yeah, it has.
And there were times when you were limping around, dragging your leg around.
I had cancer right as soon as I started pastoring, I got cancer.
So one of the things I want people to realize is that there's a lot going on under this. like this brash, aggressive leader.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on behind the scenes that they don't realize how much of an asset and how valuable you are to the community, Frank.
Yeah.
You're a treasure for this place. And you've done some things that I don't think anybody else would have thought of, let alone done.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to say from the community to you, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for going for it.
Thank you.
I know at times it's been really costly for you to go for it.
Yeah.
And at times it's been probably really discouraging at times because so much of public opinion has been focused on you and what you're doing. But some of the things that we have to offer, especially young people and especially people who are addicted and have mental health problems, are we're so much better off because of what you've done, Frank. So thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
There's a study recently that accentuates what you're saying. We studied 40 of the youth that were helping with intervention for drugs. We wanted to know their average age they started, did their family members use, and what did they use first?
Yeah.
And so these are kids from 12 to 17 years old. Out of the 42 kids, 80% of their family members use, 80%. They started at the average age of 11 years old, and cannabis was their first drug.
Yeah.
Out of the 110 adults, we had 65% of their families used. We had average age of 13 when they started, and their substance of choice was alcohol.
Wow.
Because it was legal.
Yeah.
So there we go. You got legalized alcohol for a generation, and people are starting at a young age where they can access it and normalize it in the home. And I don't think people realize that when people find themselves in addiction, their brain is physiologically affected and they can't make proper decisions. They just can't.
Yeah.
It's a borrowed time at best. And so we'll see the 10, 20, 30 years down addiction, and we're looking at what a mess those older people are. But back it up, and they were starting as teenagers.
Yeah.
Actually, some started at 4 and 5 years old.
Yeah.
And so if we can stop that cycle, if we could get those kids to discontinue and to become healthy and self-sustainable and self-soothing, they know what can help them early on. No more 10, 20, 30 years of racking up collateral damage with babies and on and on. So that was pretty revealing to the county commissioners as well.
Yeah.
And, Governor Inslee just did a video of one of our guys that recovered from Community House for passing his budget for behavioral health, for recovery, last 2 Mondays ago. So they came down and they videoed one of our guys, and because Governor Inslee did the walkthrough back in February.
Yeah.
And he was just shocked and impressed. They were like, how did you guys do this?
That's a good question.
They kept on asking. His wife was with him.
Question.
And they said, how did this all happen?
Yeah.
Why are people following you? Because we have 200 employees at CORE and another 40 at Community House. Yeah. And it's not about numbers. It's not about getting bigger. I'd like to take it easy in life, but when I feel like it's God's lead, I go.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
And
I'm really grateful you do, Frank. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll have to do this again. I think there's more to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll bring the prophetic word next time.
Okay.
Yeah. It's something else.
Yeah.
So
thank you, man.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff.